Caitlin Clark, she is the greatest scorer college basketball has ever seen.
The veterans went silent, not from fatigue and not because they were beaten, but from pure, undeniable shock. Caitlin Clark walked into a Team USA practice session and did something no one expected. Not the coaches, not the veteran players, and not even the analysts who follow the game closely. One drill, one brief moment, and the entire gym seemed to freeze. These were women who had spent more than a decade competing at the highest level of basketball, athletes who believed they had already seen everything the sport could offer. And yet, as they stood there watching a 22-year-old run the floor with complete command, their jaws literally dropped. The footage from that practice is already making the rounds, spreading quickly online. The reactions are raw, honest, and impossible to fake. But here is the part almost nobody is discussing. What truly happened in that gym went far deeper than basketball. Stay with us, because the full story begins right here. This is the story of the player who was never expected to reach this stage. She was not heavily recruited by powerhouse programs like Duke, and she was not sitting on anyone's top 10 list when she was in high school. Coaches around the country watched her play and came to the same conclusion. They said she was too slow, too thin, and too dependent on her outside shooting. The general opinion among scouts was that Caitlin Clark was a solid college prospect and nothing more. That was the ceiling they placed over her career. Think about what that really means. These are professional evaluators whose entire job is to recognize generational talent before it fully develops. They looked at Caitlin Clark, a player who would eventually rewrite the record books, and they shrugged. To them, she was simply decent, someone who might have a respectable 4-year college career and then fade into the background. They completely missed what was coming. In 2020, Clark committed to the University of Iowa, a program that historically was not known for launching players into instant superstardom. Iowa had not produced a major WNBA star in years. The fan base was loyal but relatively small, and the program itself was respected yet far from glamorous. No one around the country was circling Iowa on their calendar thinking they were about to witness something historic. Then her freshman season arrived. She averaged 26.6 points per game. People started paying attention, but many still brushed it off. Critics argued that the Big Ten was not the SEC and claimed the competition simply was not strong enough. They said she was putting up flashy numbers in a weaker environment. The same people who overlooked her in high school quickly found new reasons to doubt her during college. Then came her sophomore season, then her junior year, and finally her senior season when everything changed forever. Caitlin Clark broke the all-time NCAA scoring record, a mark that had stood untouched for 44 years. The record belonged to Pete Maravich, a legend who played in an era without a three-point line and with a very different style of defense. Clark broke the record clearly and convincingly, leaving no room for debate or footnotes. And suddenly, the people who once questioned her went very, very quiet. By the time the 2024 WNBA draft arrived, Caitlin Clark had become far more than just another basketball story. She had become a cultural moment. Her final college game drew more viewers than any men's or women's college basketball game in the modern era. Cities across the country hosted watch parties. Bars that had never shown women's basketball before were packed with fans. Restaurants placed the game on screens usually reserved for NFL Sundays. Even people who had not watched a single game all season tuned in because they wanted to see what everyone was talking about. The Indiana Fever selected her with the first overall pick. From the moment she stepped onto a professional court, the conversation around women's basketball began to shift. Fever games started selling out arenas that had been half empty for years. Opposing teams reported record attendance whenever Indiana came to town. Sponsors that had ignored the WNBA for decades suddenly became eager to return phone calls, and every bit of that momentum could be traced back to one player, the same player scouts once described as nothing more than a decent college prospect. Her journey from overlooked recruit to the most talked about name in the sport is not just a feel-good story. It is something much bigger than that.
Caitlin Clark, the #1 pick in April's WNBA draft.
It is the foundation of everything happening right now with Team USA, with the WNBA labor discussions, and with the way the entire sport is being reshaped financially. She was never expected to reach this level, and that is exactly why she did. Now here is where the story becomes even more interesting. Team USA training camps are not public events. They are tightly controlled environments. The media is only allowed to see small windows of practice, reporters catch brief glimpses, and coaches manage every detail of what gets shown. This is the United States national program, where everything is structured, professional, and carefully handled. Nothing is supposed to happen that creates an unexpected storyline. Surprises are not part of the plan, but the gym could not hide what happened that day. When small clips from the 2026 training camp began circulating online, along with reactions from veteran players, people immediately started paying attention. It was not because someone made an incredible play. At that level, spectacular plays happen every single day. That is not unusual. What caught everyone's attention was the reaction from the veterans. There is a very specific expression that appears on the face of an elite athlete when they witness something that truly catches them off guard. It is not excitement, and it is not celebration. It is a brief moment of stillness, almost involuntary, where the body pauses while the brain processes something completely unexpected. That exact look was visible all over the gym. These are players who are almost impossible to impress. Diana Taurasi spent 2 decades setting the standard that everyone else in the sport had to measure themselves against. Breanna Stewart has spent long stretches of her career as the best player in the world. Aja Wilson was coming off back-to-back MVP seasons. These athletes have spent their entire professional lives surrounded by elite talent. They have shared the court with legends and competed on the Olympic stage. And yet, in that moment, inside the gym, even they looked surprised. A good shot during practice usually does not make professional players stop what they are doing. But in that gym, several players with decades of combined experience suddenly paused in the middle of a drill just to watch what Caitlin Clark was doing. The moment that started circulating online came from a routine practice drill, the kind of structured repetition that professionals run through hundreds of times every season. Clark caught a pass coming off a screen, used 2 quick pump fakes to freeze the defender, then calmly stepped back near the logo and launched the shot without even thinking twice. On its own, that kind of play might not sound shocking. Elite shooters are capable of hitting difficult shots. But what stunned everyone watching was the distance. Even more surprising was how effortless it looked. There was no dramatic setup, no deep breath, no visible buildup of energy before taking a shot from that range. Most professional players would not even consider attempting something like that in a real game. Clark simply rose up and released the ball as if the distance meant absolutely nothing to her. And judging by the way she did it, it probably doesn't.
It just spaces the floor so much. It makes us that more difficult to guard.
What made it even more surprising was that she did it again on the very next possession. Then she did it again and again. At one point, she pulled up from a spot on the floor that professional coaches spend entire film sessions warning their teams about, telling defenders they can never allow an opponent to shoot from that far out. Clark hit 4 of those shots in a row during that stretch. The gym got loud for a moment, then suddenly quiet again. It was that specific kind of silence that fills a room when everyone present realizes they are witnessing something they will remember for a long time. One veteran player, someone with 3 All-Star appearances, stood there with her hands on her hips and slowly shook her head. It was not frustration. It looked more like disbelief, mixed with reluctant respect. The footage tells the story clearly. Body language at that level cannot be faked. These were not fans reacting to a highlight on television. These were elite professionals and fierce competitors, and their reactions revealed the truth their words might never say publicly. And here is the part that almost no one in mainstream sports media is discussing. This was not Clark performing at the absolute peak of her powers. This was Caitlin Clark coming off her rookie season, still adjusting to the professional level, still learning how to navigate a league where the athletes are stronger, faster, and far more experienced.
Feel fair to Haley to leave her on an island like that. Like, not only was Haley...
The athletes she faces now are faster and stronger than anything she dealt with in college. And the truth is, she still has not fully arrived yet. She is still adjusting, still evolving. If this is the version of Caitlin Clark the league is seeing before she has completely settled into the professional game, then the question veteran players have to be asking themselves is honestly a frightening one. What will she look like in 2 years? Now we need to talk about the number that changed everything. Because the tension around the league right now, the labor discussions, the strike threats, and even the atmosphere at training camp all trace back to a single figure. That number is $2 billion. That is the value of the massive media deal the WNBA recently signed. $2 billion in television revenue, fueled largely by one expectation: that Caitlin Clark will be playing in this league for the next decade. Before Clark arrived in the WNBA, the league was never really considered a financial success story. The numbers have always been public. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, has openly acknowledged that the NBA financially supported the WNBA for most of its existence. For years, the league operated at a loss. Teams struggled to fill arenas, television ratings remained modest, and while the league survived, it was operating at a steady but limited level without major growth. Then Caitlin Clark's rookie season happened. Suddenly, the entire landscape started to change.
Proud of us. It was a lot of fun, and I thought we played really hard.
Indiana Fever games started drawing television audiences that, on certain nights, were actually larger than NBA playoff broadcasts. That is not an exaggeration. One regular season WNBA matchup between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky pulled in more viewers than a first-round NBA playoff game. Suddenly, companies that had never paid attention to women's basketball were calling to get involved. Sponsors who once ignored the league were eager to attach their brands to it. Attendance across the league increased because fans in every city wanted the chance to watch Caitlin Clark play in person when her team came to town. The financial impact was impossible to miss. It was not just growth. It was a complete shift in the category. That is when veteran players looked at the new $2 billion media deal and began arguing that they deserved a larger share of the revenue. On the surface, that argument makes sense. Athletes should benefit from the money their sport generates. That principle exists in every professional league. But this is where the situation became complicated. Some veteran players attempted to prove that women's basketball could generate major revenue without relying on any single superstar. They helped launch a separate competition known as Unrivaled Basketball League, a new league designed to show that the overall talent pool could attract audiences on its own. The project secured television deals, sponsor funding, and began with serious financial backing. Caitlin Clark was not part of that league. At the time, she was coming off her demanding rookie season and recovering from the grind of her first year as a professional. When the viewership numbers came back, the results were rough. The ratings were not just slightly disappointing. They were far below expectations. Networks that invested hoping to ride the growing wave of women's basketball suddenly found themselves with broadcasts that struggled to hold an audience. The market delivered its answer very clearly. That $2 billion media deal exists largely because of one player. Every team owner, every television executive, and every sponsor involved in those negotiations understands exactly who that player is. And once you understand that reality, the entire dynamic of the labor negotiations starts to look very different.
We're not swaying, we're standing still.
And once you look at it that way, the situation begins to feel like something entirely different. Let's talk about the strike that many people believe was never really about money. This is the part of the story that mainstream sports coverage keeps carefully avoiding. The WNBA Players Association had a strike threat scheduled for the 10th of March 2026. Publicly, it was presented as a battle for better salaries, improved working conditions, guaranteed housing, and a fairer share of league revenue. On the surface, those demands sound completely reasonable. Player compensation in women's sports has historically been far behind where many believe it should be. That reality has been discussed for years, and very few people would argue that athletes should not be paid fairly. But if you look more closely at the situation, another question begins to emerge. Look at which players were pushing the hardest for the work stoppage. Look at the voices that were most vocal about shutting the league down. That is where the story starts to become much more complicated.
And a Fever bouncing back.
Look at who was leaking internal letters to ESPN. Look at who spoke the loudest during union meetings. It was not the younger players. It was not the athletes who had just entered the league and were still trying to establish their careers. In fact, reports coming from inside the union suggested that many of the younger players and their agents were actively working toward reaching a deal. Nearly 80% of the league was unsigned at that point, sitting at home and waiting for the season to begin so they could finally start earning their paychecks. The players pushing the hardest for a strike were veterans, particularly those whose biggest earning years were either already behind them or quickly coming to an end. Now, think about the timing of all this. Caitlin Clark was coming off her rookie season. During that year, she dealt with constant physical contact that referees often allowed to go uncalled. She had to navigate a league culture that was not exactly welcoming toward her arrival, and she was adjusting to a professional game that is far more physical than college basketball. Even with all of those challenges, she still became the most watched player in the entire sport. That meant her second season, with a full offseason to train professionally and more experience under her belt, was widely expected to be a massive leap forward.
Leading the league in assists her last 5 games, Shannon.
A strike in 2026 would cancel that entire season. It would steal a year from Clark's prime, halting the momentum she had built and giving the veteran establishment another 12 months to maintain relevance before the full impact of what Clark represents hit the league. The math is simple. If you are a veteran player who spent 15 years helping build this league into something sustainable, and then a 22-year-old comes along and makes everything you created feel like a warm-up, you face two choices. You can either embrace the wave and use it to lift the entire sport, or you can try to control it. The strike was an attempt to control the wave. What the veteran leadership did not anticipate, however, is that a wave does not negotiate. It does not rely on the league to exist. It simply moves toward wherever the spotlight shines. And that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the move that changed everything on the surface. Caitlin Clark showing up to Team USA training camp might look simple. She is, after all, a great player. But what she did there was far more than just impressive basketball.